All right. We survived our first day of math videos. Now we're in our second day of math videos. I wrote the problems I had you do. I'm just going to go through and answer them. Those that have me before know, I can't necessarily, especially with my class sizes, go through and fix every problem for every, assignment that's turned in. Just time-wise, it's impossible. But I want to make sure that you are checking your answers and seeing what you missed and kind of being able to see some description. So usually the next day I answer it or test, I always wait until the deadline's passed to turn it in. So I'm going to go through and answer those ones from yesterday. You can check them and see what you missed. I've already scored, by this point you'll be getting your grade as far as turning it in, that kind of thing. But I want to make sure you're fixing your mistakes and kind of learning as we continue on and practice. Like I said, we move through several concepts, fairly quickly, but I always want to make sure that we're reinforcing those foundation things so that you're learning as you go. So these here, we use the number line. It went from -6 to 5, and so I had you stay within that realm and kind of go from there. Obviously, some you may not even need to use the number line, but it's good to see them to see how that works. So start with the first one. We start at 1. We're adding 3, or there's a positive 3 after that, so we're going in the positive direction. So we're at 1, and we're going to go 1, 2, 3, which puts us at 4. Okay, 3 minus 4. This time we've got a positive 3. Remember that positive's invisible there. Okay, and the reason we know that's because there's not a negative out front. And so it's a positive 3, but we're going to go 4 in the negative direction. So we're 3, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, puts us at -1. Okay? And then 5 minus 9, so we're all the way up here at 5, and we're going to go 9 in the negative direction. We're going to go in the negative direction. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, puts us at -4. Okay, so those are all ones that start with positive, and we either go right or left. This one, we're starting at a negative, and we're going to go positive. We're going to go positive from there. So -2 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 puts us at 4. Okay. This one, we're going to start at negative and actually go more negative. Okay, so we're at -2, and we're going to go 1, 2, 3 in the negative direction, so it's -5. Okay, if you owed someone $2 and then went 3 more in the hole, you'd be $5 in the hole. Okay, this one we're going to start negative and go in the positive direction. Now that's like this one, except for we're going to go +2. Our answer is still over here at -3. So like this one, we started negative and went positive, and it brought us into positive territory. But this one, we didn't go enough in the positive direction to get us out of that positive. So our answer is -3. Okay. I want you to see one. Okay, I'm at -6, and I'm going to go +6. That's going to put me at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right at 0. Okay, so 0 is a number. It's an answer. It's an integer. That's your answer to that, 0. Okay. Then the challenge one, as far as doing them in succession, I kind of want you to see, because we're going to do, when you get further in math, you're going to do problems that are longer, and you've got to do several things. In fact, we'll learn about the order of operations, later as the order you do things. And when you do that, you're going to have long problems. And you've seen them. You've seen math boards. They got these long problems. You got to do 20 things. Well, you're going to have to sometimes keep running totals. And so at first, we can do this one with a number line, but eventually, when we learn our methods to do bigger numbers, you want to make sure you're good at keeping those running totals. So we're starting here at +5. We're going to go 3 in the negative direction. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to go 4 more in the negative direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, which is -2. Okay. So, if you wanted to do like this in pieces, where you could have went 5 minus 3 is 2. And then do 2 minus 4, and that would have put you at -2 as well. You could have did it that way, if that makes more sense to you, going number by number, okay? So those were the answers from yesterday. Now, today, we're going to get away from the number line, because our problems are going to get bigger. But before we do that, I want to show you a little bit about some of the symbols you'll see. And there is basically, when I get to the full method of doing integers, there's going to be basically a two-step process. And that first step is really simple. In fact, I actually teach it in a way of, for me, I think it makes more sense to go through almost all your problems and just check and see if you need to do the first step on all of them before you even, meaning not do 2 steps on every problem, but do the step 1 on all of them and then start into step 2 on some of them. Some of you may not want to do that, but I'll show you where you can actually look through a page and be like, okay, I'm going to fix all of the first steps first, and I'll show you what I mean. Now, as far as the symbols that you're going to start seeing is obviously your negative and positive sign, okay? And we've already seen where the negative, can be like at the start of the problem, like that, okay, where the negative's out here. Now, one thing that you're going to start seeing them use is parentheses. Parentheses are used to kind of keep things separate, but yet not change what's going on. And when you get into order of operations later, there is a special characteristic given to parentheses. But as far as what we're using them for here is to kind of keep things separate. I'll give you a good example of why we do that. If I do like 4 minus 5, okay, that we can see we're doing 4 minus 5, we're going 5. But you're going to have a problem eventually that will be like 4 minus negative 8 or something, where you're subtracting a negative number, okay? So we saw where you're subtracting a whole number like this, and you just got the 1. But if you're subtracting a negative number, okay, it just almost looks like a long negative. And sometimes too, if you're writing really fast, what can happen is you can end up, I just combined the two, or I didn't see the separation, and you end up with a different kind of problem. So we sometimes use parentheses to kind of section off what that number is. So we can use a parentheses here to kind of separate these two negatives, and we see that it's 4 minus negative 8, okay? So that's different than 4 minus 8, okay? Think of it like this. Let's say this negative, let's put the two differences up there. And I'll show you kind of in concept-wise why this is two different things. 4 minus 8, let's say I had $4 in the bank, and I wrote a check for $8, and it's going to put me in the hole. And we did the number line that puts you at negative 4. Okay, so that's 4 minus 8. It's like taking $8 away from 4. What this represents is, let's say you had an IOU, okay, and this IOU is $8. You owed someone $8, and you had $4 in the bank, okay, and you owed someone $8. But someone came along and said, you know what, I'm going to take away that debt, okay? And let's say you were like planning out your budget and everything, and you're like, okay, I've got $4, in my bank, but I owe this guy 8, so I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to come up with some money. I'm going to have to get to, a certain amount of money. And, they come along, and someone comes along and says, you know what? I'm going to take away that debt. I'm going to subtract away the debt that you owe $8. Well, it's like someone's actually giving you $8. Now, you not only have the $4 in the bank, but you now have, hey, I don't owe that $8 anymore. It's like someone gave me $8. So really, in value-wise, it's like you had $12 because you had the 4 that you already had in the bank, plus you're taking away an $8 debt. It's like, hey, that's like having $12 because I was spotted $8, So what happens with this in math, and I'm gonna explain, the process for it, but what happens here is this actually becomes a plus sign, okay, to where you're adding in the 8, okay, because instead of taking away a negative, you're actually getting a positive from it. It's good to have an IOU wiped away, okay? So we'll get more into why that is, but I just wanted to show the symbols of the parentheses. We need to see the two different negatives, and we need to see, instead of that and maybe running them together, we need to see the separation of the two and so you'll see parentheses sometimes. Okay, now, one important thing with that, as we go on with parentheses, is parentheses in math a lot of times also denotes or talks about multiplication. Okay, and I think even in Math Lab we did a few problems like this where we did 3 times 4 and we used the little dot. Remember we started using a dot sum? Well, also another thing that we did was just did 3 times 4 this way. Now that doesn't mean 34, okay? When we use parentheses, sometimes in this case we mean to multiply them. So 3 times 4 and gives us 12. The only thing with that is there is no sign in between here. There's no plus sign, there's no minus sign, there's no division sign, there's not even a multiplication sign. The parentheses mean to multiply. But as soon as you put a sign in between there, it's no longer multiplication. So like if I say 3 plus 4, okay, that is no longer, I've separated it and I've put a sign in between there. So now it's no longer multiplying, it is now 3 plus 4, okay, so we get 7. So that sign, if there's no sign, then you're multiplying, but if there is a sign, then we're not multiplying, okay? That sign is what makes it not multiplication anymore. Well, that's important for this because, you know, if I've got, let's just identify here, I'm not having you do these yet, but let's say I'm doing something like this, okay? And I've thrown in negatives because that's what we're building to, is having positive and negative numbers. Something like this, I need to kind of look at, say, okay, I got a -2 and I got a 5, okay? And the first thing I can totally rule out, this does not mean -25. If I wanted to write -25, I don't even need parentheses, I would have just wrote it. So that's the first thing we can rule out, it's not -25. And because there is no sign in between the parentheses, I am multiplying the 2, okay? So, you know, we'll do that later, we'll multiply those 2, and there's rules. I don't want to throw so much on you though right now. But we're just, that, as identifying wise, this is a multiplication problem. But as soon as I put a sign in between there, okay, like a plus sign, then I'm not multiplying anymore. I'm adding. And in this one, we can use our number line. You start down here at -2, you go 5 steps, you end up 3, okay? -2 plus 5 is 3, okay? So these parentheses, you know, they kind of section things off. We use them to kind of keep things tidy, but at the same time, there's specific rules that apply to the parentheses, and one of them is if there's signs in between, then we don't. Now let me put this one up. Actually, let me do it this way. Sorry, if you're writing notes and you copied that and I erased it before, you know, I apologize. But sometimes my brain does not work as fast as my hand. So my hands wrote something and my brain goes, why did you write that? But if I've got this, okay, now the first thing I want to look at is what kind of problem is it? Is it multiplication? Is it subtraction? What is it? Well, I look and I say there's no sign in between the parentheses. Yes, there's a sign right here, but that's inside the parentheses. Okay, it's not in between them. So when there's no sign in between, what kind of problem is it? Multiplication, okay? So this is a multiplication problem, 3 times -2. Okay, there's no sign in between the two. But as soon as I maybe do this, well, let me, my brain, once again, like I said, my hand beat my brain. Let's write it like this and see the difference. Okay, now this is no longer 3 times -2, that sign's in between there, and it's 3 minus 2, okay? 3 minus 2 is 1. So this answer is 1, okay? So that, because that's in between, that's now a subtraction problem. So it can get kind of crazy. Even more crazy is, we could go 3 minus, okay, and I'll put that 3 minus -2. Well, now we've got a sign in there, but we've got a sign in between, so it's now a minus of a minus, you know, and so you're seeing there, but the first one I want you to notice, if there's no sign in between the 2 parentheses, it's multiplication, okay? Now, you need, like I said, these videos, what's nice, now one nice thing about doing videos and you know, learning from home is that if you know, there's some of you guys that are like, oh, I've already heard this, or I know this, or even first time through, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Some people may be like, hey, what, you know, I kind of, you know, something happened, or, you know, you just missed something. You can go back and rewatch it and play it back and kind of go slow it down. So you're welcome to do that, you know, as you need to. Let's look at, sometimes you could use a parentheses and not. So you could have something like -4 in parentheses, and then +7 or something. So one of them is in, one of them is not. Or it could have been the other way around. It could have been 3 plus -2, okay? Now in this case, you know, we've got a sign outside, we got, you know, all those things. So, you know, that's where we're looking and saying, okay, there is, you know, parentheses was used on the first one, parentheses used on the second one. They're gonna have them all different ways. Part of that happens because when you start doing those bigger problems I was talking about, you may be working on a parentheses at the end of it, and when you get done inside there, you only have one number left. And like this, you could, you know, all this out here you're doing, and then everything in here you're doing, and then when you get done, you've just got one little number in a parentheses, so it could end up looking like this. So the parentheses can be at any place. So you want to get some practice. We're going to get some practice with that, you know, just seeing it in all different ways. One thing I've learned about math is you'll learn it one way, and then it won't be a whole new concept. They'll just, sometimes you'll see it kind of expressed in different ways, and you have to kind of try to see as many ways possible, you know, of that. And I try to, when I do examples, I try to take that into account. So let's look at some problems, and I'm going to go through what we call the first step of this two-step process. Okay, so I'm going to do -3 minus 8. And I'm going to do, I'm going to keep them small actually for a little bit here, so we can still count with the number line if we need to. So I've already had a couple drop-ins. So now we've got -2, let's do +4, and then let's switch where the parentheses are. Let's do 5 minus 2, okay, and let's do 3 plus -4. And this last one, I'm going to show you where it's different than all of them, okay? First one we look at, first thing I can look at is these are all not multiplication. There's not any of the problems that have parentheses where there's no signs in between them. Okay, so we're ruling out multiplication for now. These are all going to be either addition or subtraction. And they're, you know, we do see that some are negatives, some are positives, and so we got to figure out what are we doing. And you need to figure out first, like, what do I do with the parentheses? And then I'm gonna talk about what the first step of the two-step process is. So I'm looking through here and I'm like, okay, this one, I don't even need the parentheses because it's -3 minus 8. So I could, if I'm doing my number line, I could start down at -3 and count down 8 from there, okay? Same thing with this, I could start at -2 and go positive. And same thing here, 5, I could go negative. This one is the strange one, right? This one has a positive, plus, but then you have a negative number. So we see these two signs where, am I going to the right, or am I going to the left, right? Like all these other ones we can see, -3, and then you're going 8 to the negative. -2, and you're going 4 to the positive. 5, you're going to the negative. Here, you got a positive, so I go positive, but it's a negative number, so do I go negative? So it's like, which way do I go? Well, this first step of the two-step process, and I kind of coined this myself, meaning there's a lot of teachers that teach this way with this method, but how they call it could be all different ways. And even you could actually say it could be what you call three-step, but I think two-step, and it makes sense to break them down into two. The first step that I do is I look for double signs. So double signs, and And when I see them, okay, double signs you could say are eliminated or changed. Double signs, I'll just put are changed, okay? Or if you want to put are eliminated, but we're going to do something with the double signs. Now, what is a double sign? Best way to describe it is when you've got a sign, meaning a plus or minus sign, next to another sign, okay? Now, if you look, the only one that happens is right here. This sign, okay, has a number and then another sign. This sign has a number and then another sign. There's no sign here, you've got a sign and then a number. This is the only spot where you've got a sign, and before you have another number, you have a sign, plus and then minus, okay? That original one that I was talking about, why we use parentheses, that's another example of a double sign. So I can't remember the numbers I used, but let's say it was 8 minus -4, okay? And remember I changed it to a plus sign? Well, if you look, it is a double sign. It's a sign and then another sign. Okay, before there's a number. There's a sign and then another sign. So when you see these double signs, you're gonna have to change them. Okay, you're gonna have to change them to one sign. We wanna get this to one sign. And here's why we wanna get this to one sign. First off, when you do that, it lets you know, are you going in the positive or negative direction, okay? If you're using a number line. Also, when you get past the number line, these numbers get bigger, it lets you know which one of the second steps you need to do. Okay, so it's very important to just go through it. And that's why I'm saying if you had a test that this was number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5, you could go through before you even solve them and just do this first sign first. And say, okay, if I see any double signs, I'm gonna change them, okay? And you just go through and just first thing you do is just which ones have double signs. Now, what do you change them to? Okay, that's the meat of the problem. What does it become, okay? Does it become a plus minus? Does it become a multiplication? Because of division, what does it become? And so let's go through. And first off, what I'm going to do is, like, let's say I'm taking this test and I'm doing it this method where I say, okay, I'm going to change all the double signs. Let's go through and do that. So there's no double signs on this one. I'm just going to make it where I don't even have the parentheses if I don't need it. So that way I can go back to what we did yesterday and say, okay, start at -3, go 8 further down, and I can solve that and say it's -11. Okay, simple enough, I'm done with that. This one, I don't need the parentheses there. Okay, it's not separating anything. So -2 plus 4, you start down at -2, come 4 to the positive, I get 2. Okay. This one, I can get rid of the parentheses and just do it as 5 minus 2, start at 5, go 2 down, and you've got 3. Okay. This is the first one that I'm like, okay, I've got a double sign. I need to change it to something, okay? So that I can find my answer. And this is the easiest way to remember. If I would highly suggest putting these in a notes where you can refer back to them and keep practicing, looking at them. If you've got a double sign, like sign, sign, and sign, sign, okay, what you have to look at is if they're one apiece, meaning one's a positive, one's a minus, doesn't matter what order they're in, okay, if they're one apiece, the whole thing is just going to become a negative sign, okay? The whole thing just becomes negative. And so here's an example of that. You got a positive and a negative. So instead of 2 signs, we're just going to change the whole thing to a negative, okay? Change the plus and minus just to a negative. Now you can do this problem on your number line. 3 minus 4. Start up at +3, go 4 down, you got -1. Okay? So if it's one apiece, change it to a negative. If it's the same sign, okay, that can either be a plus plus, okay, that can be a plus plus, or that could be a minus minus. And that's what this one is. It's a minus minus. Okay? Minus minus, okay, If they're the same, if they're plus plus or minus minus, the whole thing becomes positive. Okay? So as opposed to this one that became a negative, this one's going to become a positive. 8 plus 4. Those two negatives become a positive here. So now, get out of this, like I know that's a lot all at once, but if you look now, this is just 8 plus 4, which, even if we use the number line, we're at 8, we go plus 4, we end up with 12. Okay? And this one, if you remember when I was talking about the money, you had 8 positive dollars, and you took away a debt of 4. So it's like, hey, I don't have to pay that $4 back. It's like I have $12 because I had the 8, and then I'm adding in the fact that I don't have to pay that 4. Okay, and so, that's kind of going through that. Now I'm going to keep this up here, section it off, because we're going to refer back to this. Okay, I'm going to put some practice problems here, just for us to do together, and we're going to refer back to this. Okay. And so that way we can do that. Okay, so I'm going to erase these. And I'm going to work with this key here, this little key here. Keep our eyes on it and then just find out what they are. So, -3 minus -2. 5 plus -3. Let's do, here you say, well, when's a plus plus? Well, remember, I'll just put 6 plus +3. And you say, well, when would that ever happen? Well, remember, you may be doing something that this comes out. Now, a lot of times this is invisible. Remember, we don't need a positive sign there, but it could end up looking like that on a problem midway through, where you have plus plus. Let's do -5 plus -3, okay. Well, that one's a lot, well, that's okay. So here's 4 problems, and they're all double signs, and I'll show you why. And we're gonna just pick which one do we turn it into, okay? So this is not a double sign. You got a negative, you got a sign and then a number. This right here is your double sign. You see that? And I just asked that to a camera, by the way. Did you see that? Like the camera's gonna answer. If the camera answered me, there would be a hole of me through this window heading down Glenstone there. But if here is a sign, a number, and then you've got 2 signs in a row. You got negative, negative. Or even if you call it minus, minus, you got 2 signs right together. And I know there's a parentheses in between them, but we're not looking at multiplication on any of these. We're just looking at, hey, there's a sign and then another sign. So, what happens when the signs are the same? That sign becomes a positive. Now, this one's not changing. That's not a double sign. So don't change that one. That is not a double sign. This is your double sign. And because they're the same, it's going to become +2. Okay? Then before I solve that, like I said, you can go through and do this step first. This is going to be a plus minus. See, there's your double sign, plus minus. Plus minus becomes minus, so 5 minus 3. Okay? This is a plus plus, which is just going to become 1 plus. So we get rid of both of them and we just make one sign. And then this one's going to be a plus minus, so plus minus is minus. So it's -5, that doesn't change. The plus minus becomes -3. Okay? So here's my problems that I could use a number line for if I'm still using the number line. -3, down here at -3, and you add 2, you're going to end up at -1. Okay? 5 up here at 5 positive, and you go down 3, you're going to end up at 2. Okay? If you're at +6 and you go 3 positive, you're going to end up at 9. Okay? And then this one, if you're down at -5 and you go 3 down, you're at -8. Okay? So this first step, you can go through and do them all. I actually encourage students to do it that way, because what can happen is you can do the first step and then start solving it and then forget kind of as you go on and miss some double signs. Just go through and identify which ones have double signs and change those. Now, I'm gonna put about 10 problems up here, and some of them are gonna have double signs, some are not. Okay, I wanna reiterate what we did yesterday and just have some problems without double signs and mix in some with double signs. And you're gonna have to go through and identify which ones. I'm still gonna keep the numbers small, and I'm not gonna go past where you could use a number line. Okay, that's why I'm gonna keep the numbers small, because I don't wanna get into the second step yet. That one's, this, I'm just wanting you to identify the double signs first, and then still practice using that number line to solve your answers, okay? So let me put about 10 problems up there. I'll just make them here. And some will have double signs, some will not, so you're looking to do that to where you change the double signs first and then solve from there, so. Okay, and let's say that number line, I'll keep it from 10 to -10. So you may want to make you a number line from 10 to -10, and it will fall in that range, okay? Okay, so that's -1 minus -4. Okay, so kind of go through, that would be a challenging one. I'll go ahead and do a running one here. Make it a little challenge here at the end. So that's -3 plus 4 plus -7. So, you'll have to go through, you may want to do this one at a time. Like, do this part of it first, and then do this second part. Give it a shot and see what you come up with, okay? All right.